But to set a goal that comes from an intrinsic motivated place, something inside of you, and where intrinsic motivation is something like where the doing of the thing is its own reward, right? That is a goal that is very much in line with what I think our current workforce is trying to accomplish. But I think we just sort of retract from this goal setting idea. And so to start right off the bat, I want to say that when we say the word goal, we recognize that there are goals that still remain external motivation.
They're not going away.
They actually work.
Yeah.
They're appropriate in many circumstances. But there's this whole other body of work, this whole other practice of goal setting, and we treat it fundamentally differently. We just use the same word.
What I tell clients to that point is it's like when we get to the what do you want question, it's when you begin to evaluate your approach and movement in life and you realize that most or all of your desired destinations, your goals are set towards the area of should, then eventually that is more punishment than sacrifice, because it does get hard along the way.
Right.
And while it may early on show up as compliance in you, I'm willing to do this because I have to do it, but it's obligation still. What we know is at some point that pain leads to defiance. Right. It's just an elevated form of, compliance, but it's still this sense of it's costing me a level of punishment where eventually I either bail, I burn out, I crash. So it's not that it goes away, but we have to make sure at least some of what we're putting our energy towards represents things deeply intrinsic to me rather than me just doing external or extrinsic motivator. So I kind of have that conversation where it's a mixture of both. We just want to make sure most or all isn't directed down to the should, because that leads you to, I think, just a level of suffering that's not worth it.
It's not worth it. It's in the word itself, punishment.
Yeah.
It becomes punishment. The difference between punishment and sacrifice, and we've said this 100 times so far, but I'll say it again. The difference between punishment and sacrifice is not the elimination of that which is hard, right? It's the acceptance of hard and framing it from punishment to sacrifice because of intrinsic motivation.
Right.
That's the only difference. There are so many things that you are willing to do and doing that I just don't want to.
Exactly.
And I'm not going to do that work.
Yeah. It's
not worth it to me. But I'm doing hard things all the time that people won't do. They look at my schedule or they look at my choices. I'm like, why are you doing that? That's crazy. And I'm like,
so we have a listener listening right now going, okay, great. This works. I get it. But I don't have the luxury.
Right.
Like I'm so busy. I'm buried, whether it's at home, I'm buried in my job. I've got all these demands, extrinsic motivators and drivers. So great. That's awesome. But really it's not realistic. Right. How do you?
So that person might be, they might actually be right to start with. You might look at that situation there and go, yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
So we need to build a world, build a foundation for you where you can get to this place where you can break up with have to and start having more and more of the get to in your life. And that happens at a level of income, at a level of success that is much lower than most people think.
Right.
It's very attainable, but you have to do some building. You have to do some work to get there. There is a certain amount of necessity of surviving. What baffles me, not baffles, that's the wrong word for it. I'm not baffled by this anymore. What I wish we could all understand better is how far away from the need to survive we're actually living. Like survival for most of us is somewhat built into the system now. Now I know that's not true for everybody. I know that. But for many, many people, you're like surviving is done. Yeah. You can tick that off the box. I literally have people who are in good careers, making good income, that have 2 little kids that just came into their life for the last 3 or 4 years. And it's scary. It's it's a lot of responsibility. Right. And they start to revert to this, but I've got to put food on the table. And I'm like, dude, wrong metaphor. I'm pretty sure there's always going to be food on your table.
Yeah.
It might not always be ribeyes or whatever this, you might want to be drinking the best wine you want to, but the idea that you have to put food on the table, I think that's kind of done for you, and yet they're still trying to just survive.
Right.
So that's number one. It may be true that you're not there yet, but for most of us, we can get there faster than we think. Second part is most of us are crushed by a to-do list, by all the things we have to get done. But we haven't evaluated if it's the right to-do list. And when it comes to goal setting, a lot of times people are like, I don't have room for one more thing in my life. And I'm like, well, how do you know all the things in your life
That's really good.
are the right things in your life if you don't have goals? One of the things that quality goal setting does is it allows us to say powerful yeses and nos to all kinds of things.
Right.
And I would suggest that for every yes, it's 1,000 nos. You don't even notice them after a while, but in the beginning, it can feel that way.
Yeah, I say the same thing too. It's like when we know what our yeses are, then our nos become really clear.
Yes.
But when we're trying to just understand what we're going to say no to without knowing what our yeses are, that becomes an impossible task because there are 1,000 no's.
That's right.
To every one yes. So do the easy work. It's hard. Maybe it's not the easy work, but the simpler work of find your yeses, the few that you're going to give your life to, you're going to give the best to.
Yeah.
Then it's easy to say no, or not now even, to that.
Right.
Yeah.
And people say, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And I'm like, no. The punctuation matters.
Right.
You can say no period and no comma or no exclamation point, right? That's the hell no.
Exactly.
Right? But your yes should only be yes period.
Yeah.
Right. But what we do is we say yes comma. And what I mean by that is yes, as long as I have time. Yes, as long as there's energy.
Right.
Yes, as long as something better doesn't come along. That's not good. But we can totally say, I can't do that, comma, unless I have time or unless something changes, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But it's the no that you got to learn. And goal setting allows us to find focus. It allows us to find the thing that we're going to give ourselves to. And if you're going to give yourself to something, there comes a point at which that only works if it comes from an intrinsic place, an internal, something that you can offer